Crimson Desert is a game that defies easy definitions. It's such a sprawling and diverse work that it renders simple video reviews challenging. Nevertheless, as someone who has followed the game's development since the earliest trailers, I would like to offer some of my thoughts here. There were more than a few times in Crimson Desert's development that I feared the game would never be released. Well, here it finally is, and it's fair to say it has its fair share of positive and less positive elements. Firstly, the positives. To start with, let me just say that Pearl Abyss has outdone much larger game development studios in managing to develop and release such a sprawling game in only 6 years. Meanwhile, The Elder Scrolls VI is still years away, despite Skyrim being released back in 2011. Thus, despite their more limited resources, I've been impressed by the game's technical design. On my Xbox Series S, whilst loading times are not exactly short, they're not terrible either. I haven't experienced any notable glitches or frame rate drops, which is quite remarkable for a game of this size. That technical achievement must be commended. Secondly, the game world itself is well designed. The landscapes and environments are very diverse, and exploring them is engaging and interesting. Furthermore, the scenery is beautiful and the ambience is great. When it comes to graphics, I'm not so bothered. I still enjoy games like the original Oblivion, despite their supposedly outdated graphics. Nevertheless, I should touch upon this game's graphics. The game world is beautiful and the graphics are largely solid, nothing extraordinary, but entirely sufficient. I must say, however, that on the Xbox Series S, distant textures do look blurry, though this is more a problem with the console than the game. I'm just happy it runs as smoothly as it does. Furthermore, as an action-adventure game with RPG elements, the combat is an important element of the game. Whilst some reviewers have criticized it, I think the combat system works fine and is entirely suitable. The level design is likewise reasonable, though the Abyss quests have a tendency to drag on a bit and are less interesting in my opinion. Now it's time for the negatives. By far the biggest weakness of the game is its writing and storytelling, or rather the lack thereof. The dialogue in the game feels basic and somewhat dull. However, this I can probably get over. The bigger problem lies in the characters and the story. The main character, Cliff, is rather generic and uninteresting. Some have argued the game is a sandbox and thus doesn't need a well-developed main character. However, I disagree. Unlike The Elder Scrolls, where you can choose exactly who you want to be, this game throws you into the world with a clearly defined character who has a degree of in-game lore. The problem is that the game's lore just isn't terribly interesting. The writing and story is functional, but it mainly serves as underdeveloped background to the quests themselves. So don't buy this game expecting a traditional RPG, it very much isn't that. The story is very much scaffolding for a series of adventures. Ultimately, I think this game is an intriguing, technically impressive, and refreshing experience. Broadly, it runs well on Xbox Series S, and I imagine it runs well on other consoles too. The game features engaging activities and a well-designed, beautiful game world, whilst in-game mechanics such as combat are respectable. However, the game does suffer from rather basic writing and bare-bones character development and storytelling, which might make it difficult to truly get invested in the richly designed game world.